So this next part is really about you filling in some shading and following some of those rules that we talked about, where the building should get paler the farther back they go. And we're also, of course, addressing the shrubs, like the bushes and the trees, and we're giving those some shading as well. And the whole idea is to help enhance the perspective, the feeling of depth. That's why even the road has some shading on it. And you'll notice that the road is darker at the bottom of the page, and then as it goes up, it gets progressively lighter, it fades. So you don't need to copy exactly from me. You can also look at the reference photo and determine that for yourself. So now we are working in the third rectangle of our quartered paper. So it's the third quarter. And I'm going for a low horizon, so it's on the bottom third, or just a little bit below that actually. I've drawn the horizon line, and I'm going to draw my vanishing point just above that horizon line right there. And it is off to the left. I want you to notice that. It's not in the middle, it's off to the left side. So I'm going to start off with the house itself. I'm starting with the front side. And in order to do the house from one point perspective, I have to first start off with a rectangle. A rectangle has to have parallel sides. Two lines are horizontal, the other two have to be vertical, just as a reminder. So you can't have one side that's angled in funny. Just make sure that they're perfectly either a vertical line or a horizontal. And draw lightly. You can see that I'm erasing out. I'm trying to make that rectangle a little bit longer. So just realize that you're probably going to have to draw light on this entire drawing until it comes time to shade. I've zoomed in here so you can see what I'm about to do. It's a little bit complicated, but all I'm basically doing is lining up opposite diagonal corners. So I'm doing this for a reason, and I'll share with you what that reason is in a minute, but you're basically creating a perfect X through the rectangle, lightly, of course. So it should kind of look like the back of an envelope by the time you're done. Just make sure those corners are lined up perfectly. All right, so I'm putting that X in so that I can find the center of the rectangle. So the X is the center line. So I'm just going to draw a straight up vertical line from there. It looks like a flagpole going up from the middle of that X. That's so you can find the center of any rectangle or square. And I'm going to pick a height. So this is where the roof is going to be pitched to. So I'm going to angle the roof. And I always like to let a little bit of the eave, that's like the part of the roof that's hanging over the side of the wall, extend out a little bit. So it's not just flush against the wall, it's extending out. Going from the top peak, and there's your triangular rooftop. That tool that I'm using is a drafting tool. I have quite a collection of drafting tools that I use when I draw. So I'm basically trying to get in a little bit of the trim there. That's why there's a double line. There's also this little kind of porch thing that's in between the house there. So kind of in the middle area. That's why there's like a double horizontal line. That's a little bit of a porch that's sticking out. And now I'm going to connect the side of the house to the vanishing point. So exactly like what you did before, where every line that's on the left-hand side of the house has to connect up to the vanishing point. So that's the rule. So everything that's to the left on this particular house will connect up to the vanishing point, including that gutter area right there, that eave, and the top of the roof. And just make sure that it's leading to that vanishing point. So there you go. They're all leading back to that vanishing point, and it looks weird right now, but it won't once we close off the shape. So right now it's going back into infinity, and we just have to close that off. And you do that by using parallel angles. So that's a vertical line there on the side of the house. So I'm transferring that line farther back. I'm going to have to do the same thing for the roof. I'm going to have to take that angle of the roof and transfer it farther back. And I'm extending it a little bit beyond the house to account for the eave, that gutter there. And I may end up lifting up my horizon line because it's looking a little bit low if I'm intending to put another building back there, which I am. So I've decided I do want to lift that line a little bit. So that's the horizon line. I'm just raising it a little bit higher. And maybe you got yours in the right spot, but I'm going to readjust. And just realize that art is full of little readjustments and refinements. Usually towards the end of a drawing or the end of a painting, there's less of that. But in the first stage, which this is, it's just an outline stage, there's lots of little areas that need adjusting. It's hard to get it right the first time out. So, okay, we're going to be putting a second little house behind here. And one of the reasons we're doing that is A, it is in the picture, but B, we're trying to create that sense of overlap. So one object in front of another can really help to establish a sense of space, of things going far back off into the distance. So I'm just kind of echoing that first shape of the house. So I started off with a rectangle. Technically, like if you wanted to make it perfect, you'd actually draw it as though you could see transparently through that first house. So technically you could draw it, but I'm just freehanding it here because it's not as important as that first house. It's not as crucial. So I just guessed on the pitch of the angle of the roof on that right line. But I'm repeating the same exact process I did for that first house. I'm going a little bit skinnier on that sidewall. And this roof is a little bit different. It's angled differently. It's more like a pyramid, so I'm going to angle that roof differently too. And right now I'm just leaving all my lines that are connecting to the vanishing point. So here is the sidewalk starting to get established. So all it's going to look like is kind of a triangle, a skinny triangle. That's okay. It's supposed to look like that at this point. That is the sidewalk horizontally because we're seeing the corner of a block. And that is the grassy area that's right adjacent to the sidewalk. And you can see all of this if you look in the picture, at the picture that I'm providing for you. And you don't have to use that picture if you have experience doing it. You can pick a different picture of a house that is in 1-point perspective. If you're not sure, you're welcome to share it in the chat, or you can email me and ask, hey, is this a good picture to use for 1-point perspective? So here's where I'm going to start doing some detail work. We didn't do any of that in our last drawing. We didn't put any windows or doors in to make it a little less complicated, but now we're going to try some of that. So this house is kind of an older house, and it has like that farmhouse style windows up top. And it has an interesting porch front. So it's kind of got a couple of little miniature porches there too. Plus there's one in the center. That stuff I think is really fun. All this stuff that like pokes out, stuff that's different, unexpected. I like buildings that have elements that you can't predict. So right now I'm trying to get in those 2 columns on either side of the porch, and they're a little bit off center. They're not perfectly in the center. And I know that because if I drop a plumb line straight from the window, they don't line up. I guess if you wanted to, you could put them in the center. But I'm just going off of the photograph. So I'm going to do the same process that I did to find the center of that first rectangle that we drew. And And I'm doing it to those two pillars. So I'm just drawing an X in between those two pillars and drawing a line up top to find the center of the roof on there. So same exact thing, I'm making a triangle here. Once you do this a few times, you memorize it and it becomes super easy to do. So that's going to be the little miniature porch. And the top and the side all go to the vanishing point. So I'm connecting the corner to the vanishing point. You should also notice that I'm not drawing my line all the way back when I don't think it's going to be useful, when it's not necessary. So I just stop my line. I make sure that it is lined up to the vanishing point so that it's not wonky, but I don't draw it all the way back there if I don't feel like it needs to go all the way back. All right, so there's some front windows up here too. And if you don't like the style of the windows, you're free to do a different style. That won't bother me. So the great thing is that the front of the house is not in perspective, so those can be squares or rectangles. They don't have to angle back to any point. So I'm just showing the window shutters on those windows up top. Okay, so this next step is optional, and that's just for the gables. Everything else is required. So there are these gabled windows that pop out of the left-hand side, out of the roof. I think they're cool, so I'm going to put them in, starting with a vertical line, and I'm making my angle the same angle as the roof there, and then I'm going to be doing a straight horizontal line. And then I'm going to be connecting that to the vanishing point. Again, I'm not drawing all the way back, just part of the way. Parallel line there. So it should be a vertical. And I'm drawing the pitch of the roof there, and I freehand drew that, the pitch of the roof. There we go. See, I'm freehanding there. So that's a gabled window. This is much easier to do bigger, you guys. It's harder to do it this tiny. And there is a second one back there. There's a second gabled window, so I'm going to try and get that second one in there as well. And I just want to make sure it's at the same level, a little bit lower than the first one, and I can tell because I can line it up to the vanishing point. There it is. That's how I can tell. So I am freehanding some of this, and in fact you're going to be freehanding a lot when it comes to the trees and the bushes and stuff. By the way, we're not drawing every single thing that's in this picture. There's a lot going on. You're going to simplify. All right, so this part you do have to do. This is the windows on the side of the house. So you start off with that vertical line like you see me doing, and then you have to draw from the top and bottom of those vertical lines a line that goes to the vanishing point. And I'm drawing a series of these, but that's just because I'm going to erase in between. So that way I have two windows there. You could draw a third window actually. The windows do need to get skinnier the farther back they go off into the distance. So the first one should be a little bit wider, and the second one should be skinnier. And there's the window shutters there. You can see that dividing line that divides them. That dividing line also goes back to the vanishing point too. So now I'm getting the trim on the house there. So the trim is like that white part. If you look at the picture, it's like a navy house, navy color with white trim. So we're going to leave that house behind, the back, the second house, pretty simple. We're not going to give it all the detail and fancy stuff that we're doing to the first one. And actually, if you were doing a painting of the scene, you do the same thing. You wouldn't necessarily give that second house a ton of your attention and detail because you don't want to take the focus away from that front house. So here's where we're going to draw in some bushes and shrubs. And I do use a lot of continuous line drawing. So once I put my pencil down, I don't lift up again. And you can see I'm moving things around and seeing what would look better, and I'm changing things up. I'm trying to balance the composition. That's what I'm doing there. Because you don't want to have two trees that are exactly the same height that are parallel to one another. So I'm kind of copying from the photograph. You can see it from the left-hand side is actually pretty faithful. The right-hand side, I moved some trees around. And that's essentially the main outline before we get to do the shading. So you can look at the reference picture for that. That's why I sped this part of it up. That way you don't have to watch me drawing every single thing. At this stage, I'm going to be erasing some of the lines that I no longer need. So those X lines that I drew through the rectangle, the X line through the porch, any line that goes back to the vanishing point, that's no longer necessary. I'm taking that out. So I'm just cleaning up my drawing, prepping it for shading. And I do want to make sure, though, that the general bones of the drawing are correct. So that's where I'm going to stop. Ooh, I did add a chimney in there. That does go to the vanishing point on the left-hand side. But here's where you should stop before we do the shading. We'll get to that next class.